Marking 50 years since the death of J.R.R. Tolkien is currently touring Italy. The acclaimed English author of The Lord of the Rings was a vocal opponent of any political interpretation of his stories. But as our correspondent Giles Gibson reports from Rome, Italy's far right has a deep connection with Tolkien's work.
His books have lit up the imaginations of young people and adults all over the world. This exhibition at the National Gallery of Modern and Contemporary Art in the Italian capital lists the many famous fans of J.R.R. Tolkien, including Pope Francis and Barack Obama. Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, who's described The Lord of the Rings as a sacred text, even paid a visit last year. The exhibition's curator, Oronzo Chili, showed her around.
The
Prime Minister came on a private visit. She came mainly because she's a passionate reader. We chatted for an hour and a half about Tolkien. She knows his works very well. We talked about Tolkien and the world of Tolkien and nothing else.
E del mondo di Tolkien e non di altro.
Must I do?
The first Lord of the Rings book was published in 1954, about 50 years before Hollywood turned the trilogy into a box office phenomenon in the early 2000s. Giorgia Meloni first came across The Lord of the Rings as a young activist in far-right groups, recalling in her autobiography how she used to dress up as a hobbit.
They named their meetings Campi Hobbit, Hobbit Fields.
Paolo Pecciere, the author of a book about the Italian far-right and Tolkien, explains what groups like the Fronte della Gioventù or Youth Front saw in his work.
So they could play the role of the marginal minority fighting against a leading power and projecting their hope of a return to their ideals in a future, as if the king that returns back from the tradition in the Lord of the Rings reflects this idea of coming back, if not Mussolini, well, the ideas of post-fascism.
But it's not just the far right. Anti-nuclear bomb activists, environmentalists, all sorts of groups have tried to interpret Tolkien in their own way over the years.
Tolkien himself rejected any kind of allegorical interpretation of his books. Then one might wonder, did this book and this fictionalized world have any connection to the history of the 20th century? Indeed it had, but it was very different, because Tolkien started working on his fictional world after the war, after losing his friends, and so there was a sense of loss.
So perhaps the enduring power of Tolkien's work lies in its universality, that every part of the political spectrum can find its own meaning in a group of hobbits on a noble quest in Middle-earth. Giles Gibson for CGTN, Rome.
And that is The World Today. Thank you for watching. We're back with more news at the top of the hour.